fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty Hi-Yo Silver, the Lone Ranger.
For several weeks, a mysterious and lone outlaw had operated in the Shields River Valley, concentrating his attacks on one victim, the large and powerful Esmeralda Mining Company. The outlaw's dramatic disguise, a black cape, mask, and hat, had earned him the name the Midnight Rider. Striking with daring and speed, the outlaw had so far successfully escaped capture. But in a bold daylight holdup, he was wounded in the shoulder. Meanwhile, the Lone Ranger and Tonto have reached the Shields River country and are on the lookout for the mysterious Midnight Rider.
He's wounded, Tonto, and on foot. He can't go far. You circle around and I'll follow his trail. He's unconscious, Tonto. Get the horses and bring me a canteen.
Huh. Him just a boy, Kimasami.
That's right, Tonto. But he's wearing the disguise of the Midnight Rider. He must be the man we're after.
Him hurt bad?
It's just a flesh wound, but he's lost a lot of blood.
Masked. I thought you were a lawman.
We're on the side of the law.
I suppose you're going to turn me over to the sheriff.
If you've broken the law, that's what you must expect.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
We'll camp here, Tonto, and dress this boy's wounds. He can't be moved now.
You feel better now?
Yeah, thanks.
What's your name?
Bob Jessup.
People think Midnight Rider a hardened criminal. You not look like that kind of outlaw.
I'm not. I've never killed a man. I've only robbed those who deserve to be robbed.
You are the man they call the Midnight Rider.
Well, I guess there's no point in denying that. But I'm not guilty of all the crimes they've accused me of. I've never stolen from anyone but the Esmeralda Mining Company.
We've heard about that. Suppose you tell us the reason.
You wouldn't believe me.
I'd like to hear your story.
Well, I guess I've nothing to lose. The Esmeralda Mining Company is a syndicate owned by a man named Benson. He's a crook who made his fortune swindling other people out of their property. My father owned a mine that Benson wanted. Dad refused to do business with him. One morning I came in with the mail. Dad?
Hello, son.
Letter from Jim Benson. What does he want?
Wants me to stop in and see him. Says he'll raise the price of the mine.
You're not going to sell, are you, Dad?
I wouldn't sell to Benson under any circumstances. Not even if he made me a fair offer. He's a crook.
He's a dangerous man. He'll stop at nothing to get what he wants. You better steer clear of him.
I don't intend to have any dealings with him at all. I'm going into town for supplies. Be back about 4. Keep an eye on things, huh?
Okay. What's the matter?
I think my hand's infected from that nail scratch the other day.
You better stop in and see Doc Wilson.
Yeah, I will. So long, son.
So long, Dad. That's the last time I saw my father. He went to town, got his supplies, stopped at Doc Wilson's on the way home. A few hours later, he was found dead on the trail. Shot in the back. His pockets were empty. In the morning, Jim Benson appeared at the recorder's office with a deed to our mine, supposedly signed by my father. He said Dad had come to see him and sold the mine. Benson said he paid him in cash.
Was the signature on the deed genuine?
Of course not. It was a forgery, but a clever one. Benson must have traced it from a signature on a letter. He also had witnesses who swore they saw my father sign.
But you believe Benson murdered your father to cover up the forgery.
Yeah, and then emptied his pockets to make it look like he'd been robbed.
What did the authorities have to say about this?
What could they say? Benson had his witnesses. It appeared legal. They had to assume my father had been killed by outlaws. But I know it didn't happen that way.
So you robbed Esmeralda Mining Company for revenge?
It's more than revenge I'm after. I want to prove my charges against Benson. I need money to finance an investigation.
Of course, Bob. Even if your story is true, it doesn't justify your breaking the law.
Sometimes, in cases like this, a man's driven to things he knows are wrong.
I'm going to check your story, Bob. And if I find it true, I'm going to help you.
You mean you're not going to turn me over to the law?
Not just yet. I'm going into town, Tonto, and have a talk with Sheriff McClure. I'll be back soon. Don't try to run away.
You're giving me a break. Least I can do is play square with you.
I know it was him, all right, Sheriff. It was the Midnight Rider, all right. And no mistaking that outfit he wears.
He's getting pretty bold striking in broad daylight.
Yeah, but he's brave. He hid our office up in the hills, and then he vanishes before we have chance to form a posse.
Have you made any effort in pursuit, Sheriff?
Not much point in it now, Benson. The man's had 2 hours start.
But this is the 4th attack on my company in 2 weeks. Something must be done about it.
I can't arrest a man I can't catch or identify.
There's no question of the identity of the Midnight Rider. Everybody knows it's Bob Jessup.
You've been saying that for a long time, Benson, but that don't make it so. Where's your proof?
Jessup thinks that I had something to do with his father's death. He swore to get revenge. You know that as well as I do.
You can't arrest a man for something he threatens to do. You've got to catch him with the goods.
Say, boss, I think I winged that bird today in the shoulder. Maybe that'll identify him.
Are you sure, Charlie?
Well, I saw him sway in the saddle and grab at his shoulder.
Well, Sheriff, maybe this'll prove who's right. Pick up Jessup, bring him in. If he's wounded, he'll have a lot of explaining to do.
A man don't have to be an outlaw to get a bullet in his shoulder.
Sheriff, just which side of the law are you on?
I don't think there's any question of Sheriff McClure's honesty. His record speaks for itself.
All right, you get him up.
Put your gun up, Hank. I know this man, and he's no outlaw. It's good to see you again, mister. It's been a long time.
Glad to see you, Sheriff.
Just what is this? A masked man, a friend of the sheriff's?
I know this man, Benson. He may wear a mask, but he has done more for law and order than any man in the West, and don't you forget it.
Well, if he's such a friend of law and order, why doesn't he bring in the Midnight Rider?
Perhaps I will, Benson, at the proper time.
Proper time? Your proper time may be too late for me. I'm taking losses while this outlaw runs free.
Perhaps you deserve to suffer some losses.
So, you're one of those who believe Bob Jessup's story, huh?
I haven't made up my mind yet, but when I do, I'll act accordingly.
Sheriff, I want Bob Jessup brought in for questioning. And if you won't do it, I'll use my influence to put a sheriff in office who will.
Oh, all right for me to go, Sheriff?
Yes. I'll call you if I want any more information. Well, mister, what brought you into this country? The Midnight Rider?
That's right. Tonto and I heard a lot about him and decided to investigate.
Well, he's a tough hombre to corral or identify.
Benson seems certain that Bob Jessup's the guilty man.
Sit down, mister. Much as I hate to admit it, I think Benson is right. But there is no evidence against young Bob that would stand up in court.
I understand Bob thinks that Benson is responsible for his father's death.
Yes, and he's sworn to get revenge. That's why most people think Bob is the Midnight Rider.
Perhaps Bob's suspicions are correct. I'm told his father was killed just after Benson got control of the Jessup mine.
You seem to know quite a lot about this case.
I received some information. I want to make sure that it's reliable.
You usually are one jump ahead of the rest of us. But about Bob's story, unfortunately, there is no evidence to connect Benson with Jessup's death.
What about the signature on the deed to the mine? Could that be a forgery?
If it was a clever one. Probably a tracing. And Benson has 2 or 3 witnesses. It's hard to prove anything against a man with his money and power.
I gather you don't think much of Benson.
He's a ruthless, greedy man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants.
Then you believe he's guilty of forgery and murder.
I'm convinced of it. But proving it is another matter. Benson didn't leave any loopholes.
Nevertheless, if he's guilty, he must be exposed and brought to justice.
If you can manage that, you'll be doing a fine thing for this whole community.
I'll do my best.
Oh, by the way, do you have any idea where I could find Bob Jessup?
What makes you think I know where he is?
Just an idea I had.
I would never shield a criminal from the law, Sheriff.
I know you wouldn't. And Bob Jessup is no criminal. So if you happen to see him, tell him it's a good idea for him to lie low. Especially if he has a bullet wound in his shoulder.
You know, Hank, I'm worried about that masked man. He's liable to give us trouble.
What can he do?
Now, I think he's dangerous. And I want to get that Jessup thing cleaned up before he starts to nose around.
It'll be cleaned up fast as the sheriff brings in Bob Jessup.
I don't trust that sheriff. I don't think he wants to bring Bob in.
Then why don't we do it for him?
That's just what I had in mind. Tell you what you do. Take a couple of the boys and nose around, see if you can locate him.
If he's wounded, he's probably hiding out someplace.
Well, if he's wounded, that's the time we want to nab him. And if you find him, turn him over to the sheriff publicly. And let me do the rest.
I got you, boss.
Here come my friend.
Well, you seem to be in pretty good shape.
I am, thanks to your Indian friend.
Tonto's a good doctor.
What'd you find out in town, Kimasabi?
I talked to Sheriff McClure. He's an old friend of ours. And I met Jim Benson.
You met Benson?
He was at the sheriff's office when I got there. Benson is convinced that you're the Midnight Rider. He demanded that the sheriff bring you in. If you're captured, that wound in your shoulder will be a dead giveaway.
Did you tell him where I was?
No?
Then you're not going to turn me in?
Well, that depends.
Depends on what?
On what you decide to do next. You see, I believe your story, Bob, and I understand why you became the Midnight Rider. But no one has the right to take the law into his own hands. If I let you go, you must promise that it will never happen again.
I can't do that. I won't rest until Jim Benson has paid for his crimes.
I admire your spirit, but you chose the wrong way to make him pay.
What other way is there?
Suppose you leave that to Tonto and me.
What about the money I've already taken? Surely you don't expect me to give that back to Benson.
Turn it over to me. I'll give it to the authorities for proper disposition.
But that means Benson will get it.
Not necessarily. It belongs to the mining company. You leave your disguise with us. You'll have no further need for it.
You're the kind of man I trust, mister. I'll do it your way.
Good.
The money's hidden near here. It won't take long to get it.
Tonto, you go with Bob. Get the money and meet me back here.
What do you do, Kimasabi?
I want to have a talk with the doctor your father visited the day he was killed.
Doc Wilson?
Yes. Where does he live?
About a half mile out of town on the North Road. But why do you want to see him?
I want information. I'll be back in about an hour.
Misami.
After you turn the money over to Tonto, I'd suggest you remain in hiding until your shoulder heals.
I'll do that.
Adios.
And thanks, mister.
Come in.
Dr. Wilson, don't be alarmed. I'm not an outlaw.
Well, that mask doesn't look very peaceful.
I wear it in the interest of law and order.
Well, who are you and what do you want?
Do you remember a man named Carl Jessup?
Of course I do. He was a friend of mine.
I'm investigating his death.
Carl Jessup was murdered.
I know that. I want to find out who did it.
Well, why do you come to me?
I understand he came here the day he was killed. You treated him for an injured hand. I would like to know the details.
Well, his hand was infected. He'd run a nail into it, and I treated the wound and dressed it.
His left or right hand?
I'm afraid you're barking up the wrong tree there, mister. It was his left hand. Jessup wrote with his right.
You're sure?
I'm quite sure. Oh, I know what you're thinking. But unfortunately, Jessup was fully capable of signing his name to a deed. But I'll never believe that he did.
I gather you don't take much stock in Jim Benson's story.
I do not. I think he committed forgery and cold-blooded murder to get Jessup's mine. I don't believe Jessup would have had any dealings with Benson.
Then you don't believe that Jessup even went to Benson's office?
No. Carl was a good friend of mine. And if he had been at Benson's office, he would have told me. And he didn't mention it.
In that case, Doctor, Benson couldn't know about Jessup's injured hand.
Say, you're right. I never thought of it before, but this might be important.
Yes, it might offer a chance to trap Benson. Depends on the story he has to tell. Jessup stopped by here on his way home after he'd been to town.
That's right. He'd stopped in earlier, but I wasn't here.
One more thing. What did they do with the body after the killing?
I believe it was taken to Rock Springs.
Thank you, Doctor. I may be able to use this information.
I'd do anything I could to help clear up this Jessup killing.
I may call on you later.
Anytime. Say, who are you anyway?
A man interested in justice.
There it is. Every cent I've taken.
You not be sorry you give this back.
I just hope your friend brings Jim Benson to justice.
You not worry. My friend keep his word.
Well, I guess this is where we part.
Me go back to camp.
I'm heading south. I have a friend who lives in Rock Springs. I'd stay with him till my shoulder heals.
Now, that good idea.
So long.
So long.
Hank Taylor.
We've been looking all over for you, Jessup. Kind of lucky bumping into you like this.
Benson's men.
That's right. We should get a nice bonus for today's work. The boss told us to bring you in and turn you over to the sheriff.
You have no authority to make an arrest.
You're right again. But there's a lot of people interested in looking at that shoulder of yours. I see you wearing a bandage. What happened?
Get out of my way.
We're taking you in, Jessup. It's up to you whether you want to come peaceably or the hard way.
Shall we take after him?
No, let him go. We got the one we're after. Let's go, Jessup. Come on. Come.
Benson's men capture Bob and take him into town.
Oh, that's bad, Tonto. With that bullet wound in his shoulder, he's sure to be identified as the Midnight Rider. The sheriff will have to arrest him.
We not let Bob go to prison. Him not real outlaw.
That's right. But this makes our job more difficult. Somehow we'll have to clear Bob and also expose Benson.
You find evidence against Benson?
I'm convinced that he's guilty, but I must have proof. There's no time for more investigation. Benson's a coward, Tonto. I think he'll run if he's scared. We must try and force his hand.
What we do?
Did you get the money from Bob?
Me have it.
Good. I want you to stand by, but not appear until I'm ready for you. Now, here's the plan.
But how did you get that bullet wound, Bob? You must offer some explanation.
I guess he can't explain it, Sheriff, without tipping his hand.
Well, Sheriff, I see you finally succeeded in nabbing the Midnight Rider.
That hasn't been proved, Benson. And you can't send a man to prison because of a bullet wound.
Charlie, take a look at this man. Is he the one you shot at?
Well, he was wearing a mask then. He's the same height and build, and that's sure enough where I winged him.
Well, Jessup, what do you got to say for yourself?
Bob, don't you realize what this means? If you don't deny these charges, I'll have to arrest you. And you're sure to be convicted unless you can account for your wound.
I'm sorry, Sheriff. There's nothing I can say now.
Sheriff, I demand you put this man under arrest.
Just a minute, Sheriff. Don't make a move. Any of you.
It's the Midnight Rider. At least this clears you, Bob. You've got a nerve coming here like this. What do you want?
I came here to return the money that was stolen from Benson's mining company.
You're returning the money?
It was stolen to finance an investigation into Carl Jessup's death. but it's no longer needed. Benson, I accuse you of Jessup's murder.
Why, you're crazy.
No, I'm not. You forged his name to that deed, then murdered him in order to control his mind.
Nonsense. Jessup signed that deed himself. Hank here witnessed it, and so did a couple of other men.
Your men, Benson. But you overlooked something. Jessup had an injured hand the day he was supposed to have visited you. He couldn't have signed his name with that hand.
You gotta do better than that, mister. It was Jessup's left hand that was hurt. I saw the bandage, and so did Hank, didn't you?
That's right. It was on his left hand.
When did you see the bandage, Benson?
Why, when he came to town, when he visited my office.
You're lying, Benson. You couldn't have seen the bandage then. Jessup stopped at the doctor's on his way home, after he'd been to town.
Why, how do I know that's true?
Doc Wilson will testify to it.
Well, then I must have seen the bandage when they brought the body to town.
Now you've really trapped yourself, Benson. Because Jessup's body wasn't brought to town. It was taken to Rock Springs.
There's only one way you could have known about that bandage. You saw Jessup after he left Doc Wilson's office.
And that means just one thing. You're the man that murdered my father, Benson.
You can never prove that.
I think we can, Benson. At least we're going to try.
Drop that gun.
Good work, Hank. Now tie him up and we'll get out of here. It's getting a little too warm.
I thought you'd try to run, Benson, if given a chance. But it's going to hang you because you'll not get far.
I planned to land a retreat a long time ago. But before I go, I'd like to take a look at this mysterious Midnight Rider. Keep him covered, Hank.
Stop! Don't move, Benson. Get into that cell. You too, Hank.
I think we've done all we can here, Tonto. Good luck, Bob.
Thanks, mister.
Just make yourselves comfortable, boys. Your friends will join you later.
Say, Sheriff, the Midnight Rider just ducked out the back way.
That's so?
Yeah. Well, ain't you going to go after him?
I don't think so, Charlie. I have a hunch we've seen the last of the Midnight Rider.
But you don't even know who he is.
Oh, yes, we do, Charlie. At least we know who just left here.
And he's a great guy, too.
Hail, Silver!